Let's talk about these 2021 housing market crash predictions. Hey everybody, my name is JJ. You're watching Boom Bear Bust. It's January 26th, 2021. Where is the housing market headed? We're beyond peak of the housing bubble levels. So we're way beyond where we were at the peak of the previous housing bubble. So let's start right there and get this out of the way. People are saying there's no housing bubble. The fundamentals are strong. Prices are in line with affordability and so forth. People are saying there is no bubble, essentially. Now let's look back at the previous housing bubble, which everyone acknowledges, everyone agrees that was a housing bubble. When it finally come unwound in 2008, 2009, we started seeing prices drop pretty significantly. Right? So if we agree that that was a housing bubble, well, let's take a look at a quick chart here, so just so everybody's on the same page, that we are currently in a housing bubble. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that that the bubble can't get bigger. It can get bigger, and we're going to talk about that in this report here. All right, now let's also further clarify, not every city is in a housing bubble. There are some areas, especially over in the Midwest, in Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, in the breadbasket of America, that prices are very much in line with incomes in those areas. But in most cities, we are way above now where we were at the peak of the 2006, 2007, 2008 housing bubble. And here's the chart right here. This is out of globalpropertyguide.com. Now there are exceptions. We look at the orange line here. Chicago did not surpass the housing bubble peak from 2008. But you can see most cities did. Anyone that's looking at fundamentals or things like income, you can basically throw that out the window because the market had been ultra intervened, and this intervention pretty much stops the fundamentals from playing a factor. All right, so just to recap, we have millions of people now in their homes not able to pay their mortgages, also millions more people not being able to pay their rents, and these things have impacts on the housing supply. And some of you may be saying, JJ, no, people not paying their rent doesn't impact the housing supply. Well, it can have a big impact. Think about if someone doesn't have to pay rent. If they were to get evicted, they would have to go move in with a family member or friend, maybe move in with relatives that they really didn't want to move into. But that would open up a lot more rentals, and then that would lessen the demand for homes in general, including home purchases. Right? So when rentals become vacant, landlords have to begin dropping their prices in order to fill up those rentals with someone that will pay and not someone that's just going to sit there and not pay. And what that does, that makes it more appealing to rent versus buy. When you can rent a home for half price versus what a similar home would cost if you bought it and got a mortgage, it's more appealing to rent in some cases. So yes, there is an impact. The rental moratoriums, the eviction freezes, this all plays a part in the bigger picture of housing. And we've reported on here frequently the number of people that are behind on their rent. Here's a recent article, CNBC, 20% of Americans are behind on their rent, nearly 20%. That's a huge number. All right, prices remain red hot, demand remains red hot, inventory remains ultra low, and we're going to talk about that in more detail here. But according to Redfin here recently, home prices are up 15% now from this time last year. And we've talked about this before, but this is the opposite of what most people thought would happen when the shutdowns began, when the economy started tanking back in March of 2020. But we said, and we were one of the only channels that I know about that said no, home prices will not decline. They will not allow this. It was an election year, and I had forecasted there would be no price decline and no housing market correction, and we were correct. Now this year, what do I predict? Well, I predict no price declines, no correction, no housing market crash. But I do see prices leveling out. Now, why am I saying this? Because I think the extensions are going to be further extended for all the assistance. And remember, we're seeing a lot of assistance right now in the economy. Utility bills, millions of people are getting help. They're freezing the payments and late fees on utility bills. Of course, mortgages, rents, in some cases credit cards, personal loans, student loan freezes are in effect, and I think they will continue, because if they discontinue them, then everything starts falling apart. All right, let's just take a look at a chart right here. You see 2020, we saw a much more rapid increase in home prices than we did even in 2019. Right? And also, new construction is not keeping up with the rising demand. Right? And also, we have to mention this in each housing update video. Banks no longer have to have reserves in order to lend out money. Right? Back in March of last year, 2020, the reserve requirement was waived, and that put an end to the liquidity crisis where we had the repo injections into these banks that was basically occurring on a daily basis. That no longer has to be done. The liquidity crisis was solved by just further loosening the requirements for the banks. In this case, banks do not have to have any money, no money in reserves to continue to lend, and that's huge when it comes to the banking system in general and to keep banks pumping out mortgages. Right? Remember, it's not real money that's backing the system. It's all just digits on a screen, so it can continue to infinity. So that brings up the question, how long will they allow this to continue? Well, there you have a black swan event. Something could come in and make a major transformation to this banking system. It could be a lawmaker changes the laws and requires the banks to have reserves. If that were to happen, home prices would come plunging down. So then people say, JJ, yeah, we get it. Banks, they can continue to lend no matter what because they can conjure up endless amounts of currency out of nothing in the form of loans and debt. But they say, how long are people going to be able to keep up with these prices and their payments when we see just devastating job losses every week? The number continues to be just awful. Well, even if people cannot pay their mortgage, one is they can stay in their home because of the assistance that's being handed out. And two, they can always sell because a lot of homes now, just about every home, unless you just bought it last week, is going to have pretty good equity because of the rising prices. But it's still not enough to compensate for the lower demand and the construction that's not keeping up with the demand. And even if someone is forced to sell, then they're going to usually always find another buyer coming in, and you're going to see bidding wars in many cities. We've been seeing bidding wars. We're going to talk about that in just a minute also. There's always going to be somebody to sell it to. So it's like a get out of jail free card. You can't make your mortgage payment, you're going to end up selling it because the market is still so hot with all the demand out there. All right, speaking of demand, half of home offers that Redfin tracks faced bidding wars in December as the housing market defied the holiday slump. So usually the holiday season, November, December, is slower for the housing market. Not this year, not this most recent holiday. Now, when you look back to summer, nearly 60% of homes sold had multiple bids or bidding wars, and that dropped down to about 50% of homes in December. But that's still considered a very hot housing market for December. All right, now speaking of new construction and supply of homes, we look right here, we see that permits are now increasing, so there are signs that we're going to start seeing homes built now more speedily. Is this going to be enough to offset the surging demand because of all the buyers out there and people that can get loans? It's unlikely. And unless somebody wants to shoot themselves in the foot, if the new administration wants to see this market come crashing down, they will not hold the banks accountable. They will continue to deregulate, and nothing is going to change. All right, so let's be clear. I do not predict a housing crash. I do predict that prices will level out. I do not even predict a price decline overall. I think prices will still go up this year, unless there's a black swan event. You always have to count that in. Prepare for the bear. There's a lot of things happening right now behind the scenes that no one can foresee if they will come to fruition. All right, even our last report, we talked about how Ray Dalio is predicting a civil war. So something like that, something that is on a massive scale, unrest, riots, you name it. There's a lot of things out there that could happen, but barring some black swan event or disaster or societal destruction, I see the housing market continuing to rise in the year 2021. Thanks everybody for watching this report. Stay well, stay safe, stay prepared. Bye for now. Peace.